I'd actually like to double click on that if I can. So if everybody could again take your hands out. How many people in this room are former or acting CEOs? Thank you, Wayne. Keep your hands up, please. So everybody else in the room, just take a look around. When we talk, and you can put your hands down, thank you. When we talk about the board-CEO relationship, it's not the board talking about the CEO. It is the board talking with the CEO and acknowledging that how things look from the CEO's perspective may be different from how they look from the board's perspective. And if you don't get this right, bad news doesn't travel neutrally. So what you really want on a board is the ability, we all understand that once something gets in the board portal, it has been revised, perhaps intentionally, perhaps defensively, by many, many layers of management up there. So you're not necessarily getting the unvarnished picture of what's going on. You're getting the picture of what the management team wants you to see. If you don't have the trust underpinning that, it becomes very difficult to create that kind of environment, the good, the bad, the ugly, that Wayne was talking about. So this stuff is really, really essential. The perspective that you have when you're in the board, whether you are a collaborator, whether your questions are geared toward prosecution of the idea that's come up or curiosity to enable you to get below the facts that are established to you is critically important, particularly in terms of the challenges that we have in this environment.
But you know, Jane, I think this is a really good example of if you've built that trusting relationship, when the bad and the ugly need to show up, you have the courage to deliver it. But when you deliver it, there's also a perspective from the board that we're going to presume best intent, and we're actually willing to roll up our sleeves and solve a problem as opposed to being prosecutorial when that bad news comes forward. And maybe that's a really good example of, does it really matter that you should spend time building trust? The answer is yes, because in times like these, you can trade on it in a very
It's like a bank.
way.
You want to make your deposits so you have it when you need it. What Wayne was saying, another way to frame that is in boards where the CEO is worried about blame or a bad reaction or jumping to conclusion or being held personally for things that are perhaps beyond their control, a lot of stuff like that going on right now, the risks don't disappear. They get smoothed away, they get understated, and that's not good for really anybody. So not having that kind of environment, and again, the BRC toolkit has a lot of ways to approach framing of questions, to approach really attitude and perspective, particularly with the difficult situations, in order to get the best out of the board for the shareholders, for the company, and for the senior management team.
Jane, we keep talking about the board, but we all know that the board is really not the board. It's the board members. It's a group of individuals who've joined at different times, as we were just alluding to a few minutes ago, and they've often joined with very different objectives. You may have activist representatives who joined under different CEOs. You may have board members who may have wanted a different CEO in the position, so they really aren't a single board. How do you build trust knowing that they have different objectives, different agendas in some cases?
So I think that's a great point, and you know, every report has its things that we could amend if we did it a second time. Mine would be talking about the board is not a monolith, because the board is made up of individuals with their own histories, their own experiences, their own perspectives, and perhaps, you know, their own hammers to bang on the CEO with. So you have to take all of that in context. One of the things that we talked about and really thought about was board leadership, being in the chair or the lead director. And oftentimes we see that position being given to the person with the most tenure or the most authority, only to come to find that the CEO is guarded when talking with that person, that there's not a level of trust there. So a couple of things that I would say is every CEO should have the ability, the foresight, and the, unspoken permission of the board to use each and every board member to their greatest level. So whatever, every relationship can be different, and trust. I think trust, really, to say the CEO trusts the board, trust is an individual thing. So what you want to do, and I'm going to ask Wayne to opine on this, is you build that trust. What he did with breaking bread with people in their hometowns, you build the trust individually, and then hopefully it collectivizes into a trust for the board. And sometimes it doesn't, right? So you want to have somebody on the board that the CEO can trust. It's not necessarily the lead director or the chairman or the longest serving board member or the guy that went to college with the CEO. Sometimes it's somebody different that just has a different perspective, a different mannerism, a different way of approaching the CEO. And what I would say is you can't audition for that, right? It happens organically. We would like to process everything and say this is how we need to behave and this is how trust needs to happen. It just doesn't happen that way. But each and every one of us is charged as a board member of understanding where that trust lays. And if it's not with you or with the lead director or with the chairman, to not be defensive about that, to be grateful that the CEO has somebody on the board that they can trust, and that person can come to the board and, inform of difficult decisions. So it's not, it's individual. Hopefully it becomes collective, but it can also be asymmetrical, and all of that is very human and very humane, and it's perfectly okay.
Yeah, and Jane, what I would maybe add to this is we spent a lot of time in the report around the role of the lead independent director or the chair, both as a coach, mentor, liaison with the CEO, but also in their role of herding the cats or collaborating across the full board as well. To Jane's point, that person may not always be the best person to be in the role. I'll come back to that in a second, but they're in that role. And so building the right routines and hygiene between the CEO and the chair are vitally important, so that the CEO knows, I've got someone who can carry water for me if necessary, whether it's in an executive session or offline with key board members, almost a teammate. But it also gives that chairman or lead independent director a deeper sense of what's going on in the organization, so they can almost represent to other board members what's going on, not because they read it in a report, but because they've spent that level of time with the CEO. And then I think to your point about is it the right person or not, we spend a lot of time thinking about where the company is going, and what type of CEO we need for this season of the company. We need to do the same for the chairman as well. And then for the chemistry between the chair / lead independent director and the CEO, and be much more intentional about, if we've got a brand new CEO, who do we need to match them up with for where the company might be today? Because if you get that chemistry right, then maybe you don't have some of the challenges that you were describing. But if you do have them, then I think, like most things in life, you find the people that you can relate to, and you relate to them in a very authentic manner.
Yeah, and again, I think, show of hands, how many of you are on boards where that trust relationship, that primary trust relationship, does not reside with the CEO or the lead director? It resides with somebody else. So it happens. It should be acknowledged, it should be celebrated that there is that relationship.